Good morning, guys. My name is Shay, and we're going to talk about the future of television. I have the pleasure of entertaining everybody at the first slot in the morning here at NAB, so bear with me. I see people nodding. I see some people, they want to take their sunglasses off. I can understand why. Anyway, I'm one of the co-founders of Kaltura. For those of you who don't know Kaltura, Kaltura is a 11-year-old company. Our booth is right here, so anybody that has some questions and wants to catch us up a little later, you're welcome to visit us. A lot of people at NAB are trying to sell you on what they call end-to-end TV solutions, next-generation TV solutions, OTT, IPTV, converged TV, etc. At NAB, there's at least some semblance of humility, right? You walk around the booth and there's so many different vendors. You're trying to understand, what does this market hold? What do I need to buy if I'm a buyer? What do I need to sell if I'm a seller? It's much better than the shows we go to in Asia sometimes. We've been at Broadcast Asia a few times, and some of the vendors over there would give you promises of OTT success guaranteed. Where do you buy success in OTT? If you can show me that, I'll buy £2. But here there's a sense of humility at least, because people are selling different components. At Kaltura, we want to put the consumer in the center. And what I'm going to talk about in the next 25 minutes or so is, what does it mean to develop a TV experience that's centered around the user? And here's something we heard from our customers. I actually heard it from our large customer at Vodafone. And they asked me this: when people open the TV, what do they want to do? Any ideas? Yes, in the back. That's right. When people open the TV, you know what they want to do? They want to watch TV. They don't want to talk about DRM. They don't want to talk about entitlement. They don't want to talk about access control. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be an SVOD subscriber, right? They don't want to do any of those things. They want to watch TV. So if you want to create a TV experience that's focused about TV, let's go and do that. The challenge, of course, is that the TV experience today is not about me sitting in the living room and watching TV. Maybe I'm on the train finishing the morning news. Maybe it's my kid who came home, they were already on their iPhone, they're walking into the room, we need the system to be aware of who they are. Maybe it's about controlling and understanding that multiple people in the house are actually watching different shows, so that when my kids open the TV, it's not going to ask him, do you want to log into mommy's account on Netflix, or do you want to log into your account on Netflix, right? Because we need to put some parental controls. And I'm just taking those anecdotes as examples of what it means to center the experience around the user. So at Kaltura, we did a lot of thinking about it, and we kind of tried to concentrate a view of those principles, and we came up with the understanding that, in essence, TV is a double-sided coin. Okay? On one hand, we have TV as an experience, and that's the center. What is the experience for the end user when they open up their device? On the other hand, TV is a business, because if we're not minded of the business of TV, it's going to be hard to create those sort of experiences in a way that allow us to actually make a business out of it. How many people here in the audience are operators of TV services? So we have a user right here. You can film the user or the operator. When you're thinking about operating a TV service, all these kind of scary words come to mind, right? Like SVOD and TVOD and monetization and download to own and rights windowing and studio protections and DRM and audio fingerprinting and all of those things. Those are all, I would say, business aspects, right? At the same time, you have to think about the user aspect. So what we're showing here on the slide is kind of the essence of what we thought are kind of the core components of what you need to consider when you're thinking about operating a service like that. Let's start on the left side, is the business awareness. So you got to have a content management and content workflow, right? The content is the center of that business. So the business starts with thinking about the content workflow. When we started the company, we thought that a lot of the innovation is going to happen around the collaboration. How do you bring content from multiple sources? How do you let people comment on that content? How do you integrate it into the social fabric of the network? And that, of course, and we're going to talk about that a little more, that's absolutely fundamental. But in order to do all those things, you need to have a very solid content workflow. At the end of the day, if you're a producer of content, a digital rights holder, a media company, a service provider, you have to have some sort of pretty strong content workflow system in place. You can center the rest of the system around that. So that's one. The second thing, which is probably very fundamental, is the business model management. The challenge in this market is, especially given what the consumer companies are doing. YouTube is coming into your market, Netflix is coming into your market, Apple TV partners with Sling TV, and now there's a network DVR option, at least in North America. The business model is changing all the time. And anybody who wants to operate these services successfully needs to be able to have a flexible business model. You need to be able to control multiple ways of monetization. It's primarily a combination of AVOD, TVOD, SVOD for, I see people nodding, so I think most of you understand those terms, but let's just explain. We're talking about subscription VOD. That's Netflix-style solutions. Okay, we're talking about AVOD, ad-supported VOD, and that's what most of the TVE solutions in the market. And we're talking about TVOD, transaction VOD. That's kind of the iTunes model. We all know that there are only two ways to make money in media, right? Way number one, you sell content to consumers. Way number two, you sell consumers to advertisers, right? That might sound a little cynical, but those are the only two products that exist in this market. You're either selling the content or you're selling the users, right? And a flexible business model needs to allow you to package both of those products in flexible ways. Anybody around this show that says that they have another business model in media is lying to you. There are only these two models, all the rest of it is derivatives of those two models, and then of course a lot of the people here are the vendors that are enabling the customers to be able to do either of those models. So when we think about flexible business models, we're thinking about how could you put a system that would allow you to concentrate both of those business models together and to combine them. That would allow you, for example, if you're building a subscription service and you're operating in an emerging market where the average revenue per user might be maybe a little low compared to a developed market like the US, you can put in a subscription VOD package. You can have it download to own, you can have a transaction VOD, and it all is complemented very nicely together. You can see that the big guys are doing the same, right? If you look at services like Amazon Prime, for example, it's an SVOD service. It's included in your Amazon Prime, but the content availability is relatively limited. Every time you want to have a different movie, you can go to TVOD or you can go to download to own and you pay extra. Statistics show that an average household in the presence of a TVOD option might actually acquire 1 or 2 titles per month. And when you're thinking about the price points of those, if a typical subscription VOD service is offered, let's use just US numbers and we can talk maybe later about some emerging markets. If Netflix set the price as $7.99 for a basic SVOD, and then a $1.99 or $2.99 for a 24 or 48-hour rental, maybe $4.99 for an SD episode rental and whatnot, then the gap is pretty significant. So the capability to add TVOD to SVOD could be significant as a business model. The next big piece that we have to think about is the content and end user entitlement. On the cynical view, or on the simplistic view, that doing media, air quotes, is about connecting content and audience, right? And we said that those are the principal deliverables in that market, right? You're either selling the content or selling the audience. And how do you make money? You connect the content and the audience. So the next big thing that we have to solve for is the entitlement system. Who's going to watch which content, when, how much is they going to pay for that? Are they going to pay with their eyeballs because you're monetizing it using ads? Are they going to pay for it because they're paying direct fees? Again, it goes back to the business model, but a relatively strong entitlement system. It gets really complicated when you're starting to think about serving families. So when we're talking about entitlement, what I think people like Netflix probably got pretty wrong is not having a strong sense that TV, at least traditionally, had been consumed on a family basis. Most families have one credit card with which they're used to paying for these services. But most families by definition almost, have multiple people in the household that are watching the content. Some of those people are kids, sometimes it's the dad watching sport, it's the mom watching lifestyle, it's the kids watching Dora the Explorer. You need to understand who are the people in the household, what's the relationship between those people. If you're talking about kids, is there a parental control element involved with something Netflix got completely wrong, for example? And how do you control the relationship? It gets even a little more complicated when you're starting to add more advanced features such as network DVR or catch-up TV. You're doing things like quota management. All of a sudden, my kids are recording the shows on my quota. I get an email from the provider, I have to upgrade the storage and whatnot. That's what we talk about when we talk about entitlement. It's about understanding who has the rights to watch what, where you're going to store all that content. Are you talking about catch-up? Are you talking about DVR? Are you talking about live? Are you talking about VOD? Et cetera, et cetera. To tie it all together, the last important piece of the pie is the analytics and BI, right? When we think about servicing our customers, the two principles the company operates by is this notion of customer centricity and data centricity. We want to focus the entire experience around the customer, both the provider and the end user, but we want to use data to make sure that we're serving the customers correctly. And when we talk about analytics and BI, we can talk about different layers of the usage of the data. At the very fundamental layer, when we talk about analytics and BI, we can talk about quality of service, we can talk about audience measurement, we can talk about media analytics. Those are pretty rudimentary stuff. It's surprising sometimes that a lot of people are flying those services blind. They don't even have that. But when we're talking about that very baseline level, it's about where is my content being consumed, what's the most popular content, which countries is it coming from, and what's the quality of service. Am I having issues because we're getting too much rebuffering on Android in this and that or the other country, right? Is this content popular, but we see that people are actually dropping off after 5 minutes, etc. So that's audience measurement, media analytics, quality of service. That's the baseline. If you don't have that, come talk to us. That's the absolute minimum you gotta have. But that's just the beginning. Immediately, once you got QoS, media analytics, and media metrics figured out, you have to go one level up the stack and start talking about the quality of engagement. Start using the data in order to drive the decisions around the service. And I'll give you just two examples of data and analytics that happen at that layer. One of them we're actually demonstrating here is this notion of churn prevention. Could you use media consumption patterns to understand who are your users that are at risk? Imagine somebody bought a title for $4.99, right? Or imagine they have a download to own, but they're not watching that content. That's probably a pretty bad sign that these guys are not engaged. On the other hand, imagine that you have an SVOD user who's consuming a lot of content every day. Those guys are probably very good targets for you to try and upsell. They're consuming content, they're using the service, they're engaged. So understanding how churn reduction and how upsell works based on media consumption patterns, that would be kind of the first level of QoE. If you get that figured out, and we're showing that here, so if you're interested in that, come talk to us. If you get that figured out, you have to go to the next level, and that is using data for insights, which is, what's the most popular content that I have? Oh, maybe I should actually go and acquire more content of that variety. So what are the genres that are popular? What's the most popular countries? Oh, I see that I have a concentration of people in that country. Oh, maybe those are expats of a specific community within that country. Maybe I need to go get a distribution deal done in that country. A lot of those ideas seem trivial to you. The state of the art in the market is people are not using the data to drive their TV business as such. The state of the industry is such, the state of the art is that most of the people, at least the people that we talk to, are very focused on those first few layers. Oh, my player is loading really fast. Good for you, your player is loading fast. It means you got a ticket to play in the game. It doesn't mean you're going to win the game. You have to use the data in order to understand what is the real consumption, usage patterns, user journeys, and come talk to us. We're very excited about that. All that is the business side of the TV. If there were consumers, or for all of us that are actually consumers of YouTube and Netflix in our consumer lives, none of that stuff is of any interest. It's just like boring stuff, has to happen in the background. It's interesting for the operators to be able to put all of that. That's what gets you into the game. It gets interesting when we're starting to think about the experience. And that's where, the title of this presentation is Generation I. What is this Generation I? You can think about I as the I in the iPhones and iPads, but mostly it's the I in the millennial psyche, I would say, right? I want the TV to be centered on myself, right? I want every device to be connected. I was taking my kids to school. I have a 9-year-old and 6-year-old. I was taking them to school the other day. They ride these little scooters. We're out of the house. We're having breakfast with mom. We're out of the house. 30 seconds later, my 6-year-old is at the end of the block. I can barely see her. I'm like, okay, let me run after her before she runs into the road. 15 seconds later, she comes back. It's like, Daddy, take your phone out. I was like, we're late to school, forget it. He's like, no, take your phone out. I want you to shoot a movie and send to mommy so she can see how I ride to school. I'm like, but you just saw your mother 2 minutes ago. He's like, no. For her, it's like, she doesn't understand my predicament because every device needs to be connected. Everybody needs to talk to everybody all the time, right? If it wasn't shot on video, it didn't happen. That's the psyche of, I don't know how you call those, the extra millennials, right? The guys that were born after the millennium. But the millennial psyche is that everything has to happen in real time all the time. Everything has to center on me right now. All the content needs to be available on every device. And if the service doesn't recognize that I stopped watching on one device and forces me to do anything as much as like pressing a back button on another device, it's a stupid service. Why would you ever want to use something as stupid like that, et cetera, right? It's a mindset of people that grew up with Facebook and Snapchat and all those newer services. Oculus Rift is now becoming a big thing, of course. For these guys, TV needs to operate like for most of the people by the looks. I'm judging your ages or my age, the way that we grew up with electricity, right? When you're planning your next vacation, you're not thinking to yourself, oh, in the hotel I'm going to check in, am I going to have electricity, right? It's like, electricity is just there. This is how the millennial psyche thinks about TV. My content is just going to be there. My devices are just going to get connected. The system needs to understand where I am, who I am, what I wanted to see, et cetera. So, a cross-device application experience, we think, is the absolute fundamental place where you start to design a TV centered around the consumer. An application that actually works on every device, in every room of the house, on every network, managed, not networks, et cetera. So that's one. 2, personalization, right? Once I got the video to actually play on every device, I have a strong expectation that the system knows who I am, knows what I want to see, helps me understand what content is available to me. As time goes by, the cost of production goes down. The cost of distribution of content goes down. The cost of the delivery of the content goes down. What goes up? The cost of discovery. If there's more content, I need to spend more resources on finding the right content. Sometimes it's a trivial problem, and still most TV services don't solve it, right? I finish watching an episode of a specific show, yeah, it stands to reason that I need to get the next show. But true personalization is not only about helping me uncover that content, but also doing all the things in the background, and this is why we started talking about content workflow and management and all the boring stuff on the business side, to actually maybe pre-cache some of that content so my experience is seamless. That's the one thing that actually people like Netflix really got right. So that's personalization and content discovery. Lastly, and that would be my last point on this slide, and I have 7 more minutes, so I'm going to rush, is the idea of user engagement. A lot of people think that user engagement is just get the right bits on the screen the right time, and the rest is going to solve itself. And sometimes when the content is very compelling, that's true. Right? You have a good show, people are watching it, they're immersed, they finish the show, they do binge watching, they go to the next show. But there's a lot of tools that you can put in place in order to increase user engagement. On the iDevices, a notification mechanism is probably pretty important, right? Oh, your show is actually about to start in 5 minutes, send me an alert, right? Or there's new content available on that show, or you're running out of your network storage. Those all seem pretty trivial ideas. Most services that you know actually don't do that, right? So being able to engage the user with notifications, with email, you understand who those people are. Talk to them. So that's one layer of user engagement. And then, of course, social engagement, right? If you ask the users to give you their Twitter account, their Facebook account, their Snapchat account, they're going to do that if they want to interact with their friends. Of course, you have to take kind of security and protect the user data. But if you can incorporate social features into the user engagement, TV is a social experience. And one of the saddest things perhaps about kind of the Generation I is that it needs to navigate the correct balance between TV as a personal experience. It's me sitting on the couch and my wife sitting on the couch next to me and we're each watching our devices, or could we actually facilitate some interaction where there's some element of social activity? Sometimes it's with the people that are within the family, sometimes it's with the people that are our friends on the social networks, etc. So those are the two coins of that kind of gold, two sides of that gold coin. I'm trying to do no shameless self-promotion, so just one slide on what Kaltura offers, but I'll skip it because I'm short on time. But come see what we're offering kind of in a booth. You'll see that we've tried to embed most of those principles in a relatively simple to use platform. It's relatively end-to-end. I'm using words carefully here because, again, NAB is a humbling experience and we got to keep it real. But how could you package everything I just said in a platform? Come and we'll give you a demo. I'll give you just a hint that in order to package it, we thought that there are three critical components in order to give you all of those capabilities within a platform. And we're concentrating that in three different components, which are software, service, and kind of a cloud operation. In the world of software as a service, we all know that the TV is moving to the cloud. So a data-driven platform that's running on the cloud, it has modular APIs and architecture, so you can access it from any device, on any device. You can use templated approaches, or you can kind of build your own. And then a very strong cloud operation, especially when you're thinking about items like live events, news, sports. The capability to deliver those services at scale is actually pretty significant. We talked earlier about problems of content workflow and entitlement, for example, as the core of the system on the back end. It's one thing to be able to send a camera crew and to be able to have a live event and to send it to 50,000 people. It's a completely different thing to do that on the night of the Olympics and to be able to do that for millions of people. There are emerging problems that emerge with scale. And the capability to do it on the cloud is a reality that's slowly taking form. When we would come to NAB 3, 4, 5 years ago, you talk to operators, you talk to MSO, and they would say, the cloud is never going to scale for TV. TV is probably one of the last workloads to ever go on the cloud. That reality is changing because people have learned that the cloud actually offers burstable capacity. It's beginning to offer the economics that actually make sense. And it definitely has the flexibility and agility that allows you to take all the different flexibilities, the business models and experience that we discussed, and be able to deploy those services at scale with fast time to market, etc. I think we have time for about 2 or 3 questions. Any questions from the audience? Not all at once. Questions from the audience at home? Thank you very much.